The letter arrived smeared with dust and hope, promising marriage, land, and safety. But the moment Eliza stepped off the rattling train and saw the sheriff's eyes harden, she knew something had gone terribly wrong. Because instead of a groom waiting with flowers, there were whispers, turned backs, and a woman clutching a crying child who stared at Eliza like she was a ghost, come to steal a life already claimed. Eliza had crossed 3 states to escape hunger, and a father who sold promises he couldn't keep, trusting a mail-order contract signed by a man named Thomas Reed, a cowboy who swore he was alone and ready for a wife. But the sheriff pulled her aside and spoke low, telling her, Thomas already had a wife buried or abandoned, depending on who you believed, and another woman living in his house right now, very much alive. The town watched like wolves as Eliza's knees weakened, her future collapsing in the dirt at her feet, her reputation already ruined simply by arriving. That was when a shadow broke from the crowd. Boots slow, hat tipped low, a scar cutting through one eyebrow. And the stranger's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade as he said the words that would seal her fate. His loss is my blessing. His name was Caleb Holt, a cowboy known for silence and trouble, a man people feared but needed. And when he offered Eliza his arm, the other woman screamed that Eliza was a thief, that she'd come to steal a husband twice over. And suddenly fists flew, accusations burned, and Eliza realized this town would devour her unless she chose fast. Caleb didn't smile when he led her away, didn't promise love, only protection. But that night, as she sat in his cabin staring at a locked door and a single bed, she overheard men outside arguing about Reed's debts, a missing body, and a secret that made Caleb dangerous. And when Caleb finally spoke in the dark, he told her she was safer married to him by sunrise, because the man she came for was already married to lies, blood, and something buried that was not done claiming wives. Eliza did not sleep because the walls whispered in the night, carried footsteps that circled Caleb's cabin like hungry thoughts. And when dawn bruised the sky, she understood why he had spoken of marriage like a shield rather than a vow. Because before the sun fully rose, Thomas Reed arrived with a smile too calm for an honest man, bringing with him the woman from the station and claiming both wives as if they were livestock, insisting the first was lawful and the second a mistake. And Eliza felt the room tilt when she realized he meant to decide which woman lived as his burden and which would vanish. Caleb stood between them, still and lethal, revealing that Reed's first wife had never left him, that she had tried to run, that the river behind Reed's ranch had swallowed more than cattle over the years. And when the woman at the station screamed that it was a lie, Caleb threw a rusted locket on the table, cracked and stained, the same one Reed's first wife wore in the photograph sent with Eliza's letter. The room erupted as Reed lunged, but Caleb was faster, pinning him long enough for the truth to spill. That Reed married women to erase debts, traded them like currency, and buried the ones who refused to stay quiet. The sheriff burst in too late, torn between law and fear, and Eliza realized the town had known fragments all along and chosen silence because Reed owned too much land and too many men. When Caleb declared Eliza his wife before witnesses, not as romance but as a challenge, Reed laughed and swore the marriage meant nothing because Caleb carried blood on his own hands, a secret that would destroy him if spoken. That night, as Eliza signed her name beside Caleb's in the church ledger with shaking fingers, she learned the truth of his scar and his reputation, that he had once been hired to guard Reed's ranch and found the shallow grave of a woman who begged him to remember her name, that he killed the man who helped bury her and walked away carrying guilt instead of justice. As bells rang hollow, Reed was released for lack of proof, and Eliza understood the marriage had not ended the danger, it had sharpened it. Because Reed leaned close and whispered that wives were easy to replace, but graves were patient, and Caleb's blessing was about to demand a price. The threat followed them like a sickness, and Eliza felt it in every creak of the cabin and every glance from townsfolk, who feared the truth more than they feared Reed. until the night screams split the valley and fire lit the sky from Reed's ranch, drawing everyone running, because flames have a way of loosening tongues. Eliza reached the riverbank just as Reed dragged the woman from the station toward the water, drunk on rage and certainty, shouting that wives were promises meant to be broken. And when Eliza screamed his name, he laughed and confessed everything. The contracts, the graves, the way the town paid him in silence, believing no one would dare speak now. Caleb emerged from the firelight, carrying a shovel instead of a gun, forcing Reed to the ground beside the shallow pit already dug, and in front of the sheriff, the townspeople, and the woman sobbing in the mud. Caleb made Reed unearth the bones of his first wife, proving every lie with rotting certainty. Reed tried to bargain, to accuse Caleb of murder, but the woman from the station spoke first, her voice cutting through the night as she confessed she had helped Reed once, thinking love demanded obedience. And the town finally broke, because too many sins stood breathing in one place. Reed was taken screaming, the river refusing him this time. And when dawn came clean and quiet, Eliza realized the danger had ended, not with the wedding, but with the truth dragged into the open. Weeks later, as the ranch changed hands and the town learned to speak again, Eliza chose to stay, not because she was owned, but because she had survived. And when Caleb asked her if she wished to leave, now that the threat was gone, she answered by placing the recovered locket into his scarred palm and telling him blessings earned through blood must be guarded with honesty. They married again, this time by choice. And when the train passed without her on it, Eliza understood that Reed's loss truly had become her blessing, because she had crossed the country to be claimed and instead claimed her own ending, standing beside a man who faced his sins and chose her in the light, not the dark. Peace lasted only long enough for Eliza to believe in it, which was how she failed to notice the signs. The way Caleb stopped sleeping through the night, the way strangers lingered too long near the fence, the way the town's new confidence felt rehearsed, as if courage were a performance they feared forgetting their lines to. When Reed was sentenced, his men scattered, but guilt has a way of regrouping, and one evening a letter arrived with no name and only 3 words written in a trembling hand, he told us. Eliza knew instantly what it meant, that Reed had never worked alone, that the graves they found were only the ones he could not move in time. And when Caleb finally admitted there had been others, ranchers, deputies, businessmen who benefited from disappearing women, Eliza felt the same cold collapse she'd felt stepping off the train months earlier. The town turned quiet again, not from fear this time, but calculation, because exposure threatened everyone who had once looked away. When a barn burned on the edge of town and a witness vanished by morning, Caleb realized truth alone was not enough to keep them alive. Eliza made the decision before he could stop her, walking into the town, meeting with Reed's ledgers, names written in his careful hand, debts recorded in women's lives, and she read them aloud without shaking, knowing every word stripped away protection, but also hesitation. By nightfall, alliances shattered, arrests followed, and the town bled itself clean in public. But when a gunshot rang out from the crowd and Caleb fell, Eliza learned the cost of dragging monsters into daylight was never paid in advance. Caleb survived, but survival is not the same as mercy, and as he healed, the town rebuilt itself smaller and humbler, stripped of men who once believed silence was neutrality. Eliza became something no letter had promised her, not a wife sent west to be owned, but a woman known, feared, and trusted. And when the last trial ended, and the river finally ran without secrets, she and Caleb stood where the first grave had been uncovered and chose to leave. They sold the ranch not from defeat but release, understanding some land remembers too much, and boarded a train together without contracts, witnesses, or ghosts. Years later, in a place where no one knew their names, Eliza would sometimes open the old locket and think of the girl she had been, believing safety could be mailed, believing survival required obedience, and she would close it again, grateful for the lie that broke her open. Caleb never claimed he saved her, and Eliza never claimed she redeemed him, because what bound them was not rescue but recognition. Two people who refused to inherit the cruelty they uncovered. When asked once how they met, Eliza smiled and said she arrived for a wedding that was already ruined, and Caleb added quietly that blessings rarely come clean. But when you face them honestly, they stop asking for blood.